Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is the Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 12th of September 2025. Sorry I am late to it today, as I warned yesterday. I was opening a school library that's just been redone. I got to cut a big red ribbon and they had my book there, my books, The Curse of the Mire, Grease Lightning. They are teaching the Curse of the Mile. They're using it as a book in their class to help deliver Maya and literature as well. So that's cool. They used it last year and they liked it so much using it again this year. Happy days. So whoop whoop. And I got to cut a big red ribbon, which is, I think I've won life now. Now I've opened something. That surely, I mean, that's it now. I might just pack up shop and just retire and slowly dwindle away to an eventual death now. I have one life. Anyway, if you're interested, there's a book probably for 9 to 14-year-olds, but I think anyone can read it. It's good stuff. Right. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find them linked in the description below. We have 890 personnel lost. That's about where it's been. In fact, it is exactly what it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. 1 tank, 2 troop-carrying AFVs, 40 artillery systems. That's ticked back up. Not quite double the daily average, but getting there. 2 multiple launch rocket systems and 64 vehicles and fuel tanks. So, again, not huge numbers. Interesting claims concerning some larger columns of vehicles that we're going to look at in a second. Let's just talk a little bit about personnel. Russia is apparently regrouping. Due to water shortages in Donetsk, many Russian units have turned to volunteers to ask for essential supplies. And through that process, some OSINT people, that in this case Unit Observer, has been able to confirm that the 61st and the 336th Naval Infantry Brigade, so Marines, your more crack troops, are in Donetsk, joining the Russian Naval Infantry grouping there. Russian Marines from the 61st Brigade recently redeployed from Kherson. Thank volunteers for donating water tanks in this video filmed in the hypermarket parking lot in Donetsk. 336th Naval Infantry Brigade was redeployed toward Pokrovsk as well, joining 177th Regiment, 61st, 155th and 40th Brigades already in the area, all likely operating under the Russian Naval Infantry grouping. So, you know, being able to find out who's there by just looking on social media to see, you know, which soldiers, what patches they've got, and what Telegram channel that they are posting to say, look, thanks to the locals for giving us this water. Right, now we know you are in the area. And that tells you then that Kherson is being stripped. We've heard elsewhere that Kherson is being, you know, the troops are being pulled from there, in this case to Donetsk, but I think I've also seen up maybe into the Zaporizhzhia front as well. And so further south from Pokrovsk, it's quite challenging for the Ukrainians. I think, the Russians have made some gains going further south from here. So while the Ukrainians are having some success in surrounding the Russians in this part of the Pokrovsk front, they are having trouble much further down here. And the Russians are definitely making gains. In fact, I heard from Zhenya this morning that the enemy occupied settlements of Ivanivka, Zeleny High. So that is, am I right? Is that over here? I think Zeleny High. That's Sortan's a couple of times, I think. Iskra, Alexandra had, which I think the Ukrainians, in my last mapping update, I said the Ukrainians had taken Alexandra had, and now they seem to have lost that. And the Russians are also advancing towards the settlement of Filia in the Novopavlovsk direction. So it's looking challenging for the Ukrainians there, and it could be where some of these new groupings, new units have been, or not new units, but these units have been sent. I don't know, but a mixed bag of nuts maybe on that eastern front for the Ukrainians. Apart from Poland, there's some other news, says Kriegsforscher, who is someone who is operating on the front, was up in the Sumy area, now not. As I said a couple of days ago, Russians are going to use much more AFV and tanks during the future advance. And this is what they do right now. 1 to 2 AFVs on a daily basis at the Dobropilia direction. They don't live long, but we have a fact. So trying to understand, obviously, when English isn't the first language, it's difficult to kind of get a proper sense of what the claim is. From what I understand here is that the Russians are using more starting to use more traditional combat assets. Are they producing them? Are they getting them to the front? Because interesting, you see here a Russian column, this in the Zaporizhzhia direction, of military vehicles was struck by Ukrainian FPVs. Quite an extraordinary video this, because you've got all of these soldiers watching one of their vehicles fundamentally disassemble, and they're all standing either on or by the vehicles. One that's been hit, one presumes, as it says here, by Ukrainian FPVs. I'd be like, well, if there's one FPV, there could be 2, 3, 5, 10. Like, just standing watching it right next to your vehicle is surely an insane thing to do. You're just asking to be hit, but nonetheless, that appears to be what they are doing. Then we hear here a failed operation of Russian paratroopers filmed by one of the Russian servicemen. A Ukrainian drone timely detected the movement of the enemy BMD-2 column with paratroopers. Along the way, Russian paratroopers encountered dozens of burned and abandoned vehicles left from previous advances. In the middle of the route, the assault ends before it even begins, as when trying to bypass a traffic jam of burned vehicles, the lead BM2 loses a road wheel. The armoured group comes under artillery fire. The enemy unsuccessfully tries to pull out the stuck equipment and eventually retreats. So again, a case of using traditional combat assets and not having a lot of success, and having to turn back here. So could this, I'm trying to feed back into what Kriegsforscher has said, they're using more AFVs and tanks. They will do for future advances, and that could be the case. Not that we are seeing that hugely reflected on the loss stats, which have 1 single tank and 2 troop carrying AFVs from the last 24 hours. Now, bad news for the Ukrainians, and this was widely reported yesterday, that unfortunately they have lost another pilot, and therefore almost certainly the plane. A Ukrainian pilot has been killed this afternoon. Major Alexander Borovik was on a combat mission in his Su-27 in the Zaporizhzhia direction of the front when the tragedy happens. No further details are released, and Russia has not claimed a shootdown yet. So I don't know why that happened, but sadly another pilot, and these, of course, the planes and the pilots are in such short supply that they are supremely important. Now, to go back to vehicles and defending against drone attacks, this is yet another example of a sort of porcupine approach to defending from drones. Just incredible. Look at all of these. Are they iron rods sticking out there? That'll make it pretty damned heavy. Or are they just stuck out bamboo rods or something? But yeah, that's a Bukanka that has been insanely protected. Goodness me. Anyway, I presume it does a job. I'll try and just aim over that and into the window there, to be perfectly honest. Right, I reported a ship that was hit yesterday with a drone. It's actually bright red, because you see it on the thermal camera here, and you just think it's going to be naval grey. But actually it's a bright red ship, but it is a ship that has an awful lot of equipment up here. You see all those radars? That was where the drone hit, and you can see it's just above the bridge, so the bridge is going to be in trouble as well. Astra reports that the captain of the Russian vessel was injured in yesterday's drone strike. He was hospitalized with shrapnel wounds, but said the ship remained afloat and reached port on its own. The MPSV-07 class vessel suffered heavy damage to its bridge, disabling navigation and comms systems. So that's a good strike from a single FPV drone, and that was all the way over by Novorossiysk. So that tells you that they are able, I presume, to use motherships in the area, USVs probably, rather, or it could be a UAV, it could be an aerial drone, like a Bayraktar or something, a larger drone, fixed-wing drone carrying FPVs, or it's probably going to be a USV, a surface vessel carrying drones that then take off and use the larger vessel as a big repeater. It's still a long way to send a signal back to Ukraine, though. So that's good news for the Ukrainians there. Now we're going to come on to distant strikes, and it was a huge night of strikes for the Ukrainians last night, but we don't have too much information. I'll talk about that in a second. 40 drones from the Russians, so far fewer drones sent last night from them. One of the lower days that we've seen recently, 33 of which were suppressed, 7 therefore getting through. Don't have too much detail about what may have been struck, other than to know that Sumy was struck following a drone strike this morning. The body of a security guard was found under the rubble, unfortunately, there. And then we also hear a radiation catastrophe could occur near Kharkiv, says Anton Gerashenko. Russia is shelling a laboratory of the institute storing several dozen pounds of enriched uranium, according to the New York Times. The Kharkiv Institute of Physics and Technology has been already hit by the Russians a massive 74 times. It's been damaged so many times by drones, missiles and artillery that it could not be an accident. After the Russian invasion, scientists halted experiments and put the neutron source into a long-term shutdown mode, but the uranium remained, along with the danger of a release. Relocation is understandably an extremely complex task, not the sort of thing that you can move very easily, so safer to keep it there as safely as possible, but if the Russians are continually bombing the crap out of it, then it could be in trouble. Now, last night, there were claims of a massive attack across the Russian border into Russia, across the Ukrainian border into Russia. Some drones aimed at Crimea, a lot of drones aiming into sort of Volgograd. Is that maybe Voronezh region, Rostov down there? And then you've got a lot going up towards Moscow and St. Petersburg direction. Now, I've talked to you a number of times about the sheer volume of Ukrainian drones that are often claimed, but the very little battle damage assessment we're getting. And I have a feeling that the Russians are getting better and better at shooting these drones down. So at the end of the day, it's the same for the Ukrainians. You know that the Russians are, you know where the drones are going to be sent, right? Generally speaking, they're going to be sent from similar sorts of places, and they're going to be crossing the borders, in certain areas. And you just need to place an absolute ton of air defense there. Now, do they have a ton of air defense? No, but, they do have some air defense units, obviously mobile air defense units. And these Lyuty drones, for example, are quite easy to shoot down. They're pretty big, slow-moving drones. So last night we heard this. We've never recorded such a huge number of drones through the Bryansk region, then the Smolensk region in the direction Tver, Pskov and Leningrad region. So that's these ones. Never seen such a large amount of Ukrainian drones going north through Bryansk. So that's there. All specified regions prepare for a massive drone attack, said the Russians last night. Ukrainian drones continue to enter Russian and occupied territory, mostly into the Bryansk region. Reports vary, but already at least 150 Ukrainian drones are on their way, striking Russian targets. So you should expect a massive night of destruction, but we don't hear too much. Now, here is a video. This compilation is of the Ukrainian Lyuty long-range strike drones being shot down at low altitude by Russian mobile ground fire units. The Russians previously experienced such losses from their Shahed and Gran 2 drones until their altitude was raised to be too high for ground units. So this looks like the issue the Russians faced when the Ukrainians started intercepting their units, Shaheds, much more frequently. Here you see a Lyuty drone. It comes into the searchlight, and that's going to be fairly easy to shoot down. And indeed, they do one there. Just mind you, look at where they're firing these rounds. It looks like they're just firing it into the vehicles next to them along the ground here after this explosion. So look now there. Oh no, actually no, it was up. But yeah, another one shot down, then another one shot down here. You've got quite a lot of lead being pumped into the air by these mobile air defense units. That was shot down, obviously it hit it, and it hit the wing or something, and it came down. Here's another one, and that gets hit. So I wonder how frequently this happens. My thoughts are it probably happens quite a lot. And I think a large number of Ukrainian drones are routinely shot down every single night. Because so they should be, if you are worth anything as an air defense. Like, you think the number of drones that the Ukrainians shoot down, like, there shouldn't be a category difference between the Ukrainians and the Russians too much. The Russians aren't like completely stupid, and they do have the tech and the munitions and the weapons to shoot these things down to some degree. So I wonder whether the Ukrainians are going to have to start to really think about how to avoid their drones getting shot down using the techniques that the Russians themselves have been using. And that's what we see plenty of during this war, adapting, copying the other side, so on and so forth. Now, there is a number of data points about the Ukrainian drone strike last night. So there was at least some success. And there could well be a whole heap more that we will find out about later, as is often the case. Smolensk has seen the most social media coverage so far as Ukrainian drones attack Russia, said Tim White last night. A gas station is reported to have been hit, which won't help the fuel crisis. And he said more reaction from Smolensk, Russia, after the drone attack on the city, with a fuel station said to have been hit. Other people saying it was actually an oil depot. Russia, Lukoil gas stations in Smolensk, population 313,000, will no longer have gasoline after the city's fuel depot was destroyed by Ukrainian drones. So mentioning petrol stations, but actually saying a fuel depot was taken out there. And that does look like a fairly significant fire going on. As a result of the airfield attack, the Kardimovo oil depot in Smolensk region was hit. At least 2 hits were recorded, according to Zaporizhzhia, and that tank park has been geolocated with 10,900 cubic meters for light petroleum products being able to be stored there. And that's what you see. That was hit. What else do we have? Russian air defenses were active over Narofominsk in Russia's Moscow Oblast. This is where the home base of the notorious 4th Kantemerovskaya tank division is located, although at this moment it's unclear whether this was the actual target of the attack, but there's another region that was under a lot of pressure last night. Then Leningrad region has been under constant Ukrainian attack throughout the night, and it continues to be so this morning. We're yet to hear of any decent battle damage assessment. There are, this is, good 800 kilometers from Ukraine. There are denials from the Russians just saying there's debris, we shot everything down, there's debris falling. But there is also the admission that a ship in the Primorsk oil terminal in the Baltic Sea in the St. Petersburg area is on fire after the drone attack. So a ship is burning, and indeed this is supposed to be the evidence of that burning. Ukrainian drones also struck Russia's Leningrad region overnight, says no reports, with the attack continuing into the morning. It's still unclear what was hit. The damage assessment is ongoing, so he doesn't say it there, but that I've seen claimed as being the ship that's on fire in with other sources, but who knows. There's quite a lot of really important port infrastructure there, and oil infrastructure too, and gas infrastructure, some of which has been previously targeted. Now here we have a claim that the Vtorovo oil pumping station owned by Transneft was struck by a Ukrainian drone in the Vladimir region. This is 200 kilometers east of Moscow, 700 kilometers from Ukraine. So you're getting really high up into Russia here, distance hits, and this is just one explosion that we can see, that we know about from there. I don't know how problematic that will be for the facility, but that's been struck. An ammunition depot was also reportedly under attack in Russian-occupied Luhansk last night, and the resulting fireworks were deemed as pretty impressive. That's according to Anton Gerashenko again, so some secondary explosions going off there. Bing, bang, bong. In the words of Donald Trump, boing, boing, bing, bang, bong. So, yeah, some success for the Ukrainians, but probably, hopefully, an awful lot more to come out. But potentially, the Ukrainians are getting a lot of their drones shot down. But that is just my speculation, so don't take that as a given at all. Right, missile fragments found after the Ukrainian recent strike on Topaz. So this is a facility I've mentioned twice. I've given you video evidence of it in the last 2 days, and then it was actually 3 nights ago. So 3 days in a row I've talked about this facility. Now it was struck with those cruise missiles or cruise like drone missiles. Some saying they were Peklos, some saying that they were FP5s, and there are different claims. Peklo seems to be what most people are thinking, but I think there was a variety of stuff used there. And missile fragments have been found at this Topaz facility that don't match any known weapon in Ukraine's arsenal. A Taiwanese-made engine, simple fiberglass body. What did Ukraine just test? So they could be in the process of testing new and hopefully more challenging weapons for the Russians. Now, Ukraine's about to flip the drone war maths, says Euromodern Press. Germany's $350 million and the UK buying thousands of long-range drones, rolling off the production lines at 100 per day. Russia's spread across 11 time zones with no way to protect their refinery and military base. So it could be that you're going to start seeing a ramping up now of Ukrainian strikes on Russia. Last night was a big night, still a little bit underwhelming in terms of the evidence we have so far. Not sure about this one, but I've only heard it from Igor Sushko. Druzhba oil pipeline has been attacked, this time by Ukrainian cruise missiles, and that's referencing a video from 5 days ago. But I think he's possibly saying it was attacked again last night, but I haven't seen any other evidence of that at the moment. So lots going on. No doubt, just not quite enough evidence yet. Then we're going to talk a fair bit about Poland and the drones going into Polish airspace from Russia. And sadly, Donald Trump was castigated. Not sad that he's castigated, he's absolutely right. Lots of people just pulling their hair out of what he's saying again in terms of the drones. It's just appeasing Russia or just towing Russia's narrative line here.
What's your reaction to Russian drone incursion into Poland?
Could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake, but regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation. But hopefully it's going to come to an end.
So the first response is could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake. And yet the Polish themselves are saying the complete opposite. Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says Trump continues to give Russia break after break and benefit of the doubt. This will encourage Russia to further escalate, knowing the US won't step up to respond. Gary Kasparov says, as I predicted, Trump is quicker to call it a mistake than even the Kremlin. Anyone who thinks a Russian asset will defend NATO nations is living in a fantasy. Europe has slept through a dozen wake-up calls already, and soon the lives lost won't only be Ukrainian civilians. And of course, you know, Senator Shahin from the US said, I showed you a video of her yesterday saying there have already been 7 red lines, 7 threats from Trump that have run out and nothing's happened. 7 times the Russians have outlived a 2-week threat. Trump is giving every get out of jail free card to Russia that he possibly can. And again, you know, you can only really conclude that he's compromised in some way. This is just insane. Now, Michael Weiss says sources in Europe told me that Matthew Whitaker, so he's the US ambassador to NATO, who's actually been fairly strong rhetorically over the last week, but he didn't even show up to the emergency meeting in Brussels yesterday. So I presume this is the Article 4 meeting. So Article 4 is a NATO invocation to talk about the threat that Poland has been under, given the Russian drones going into the nation. And the US couldn't even send their normal ambassador. They sent the deputy instead. It's a kick in the teeth, isn't it? It's literally his job is the ambassador to NATO. He is their NATO guy. And this is Article 4 of NATO being invoked, and he can't be bothered to turn up. Absolutely incredible. And then you've got Trump saying, it could have been a mistake. To which the Polish Foreign Minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, is in Kiev today, actually, said, no, that wasn't a mistake. So the Polish, they're the ones that should know, saying, no, it wasn't a mistake. In fact, President Nawrocki, who is a right-wing populist, very much aligned to Trump, a friend of Trump's, been over to the White House a number of times, or he's been to White House and Mar-a-Lago a number of times. I want to strongly warn against Russian disinformation claiming that the drones which entered Polish airspace, were Ukrainian in order to drag Poland into the war. This is a lie. So that's answering a lot of the Russian disinformation that's filtering into Poland saying that these were Ukrainian drones. And then you've got Donald Tusk here. I think I can only understand this as being directed at Trump. We reject all manipulations and disinformation suggesting that Ukraine is behind the attack. So that is more to do with Nawrocki, what he was saying. The responsibility lies with Russia. This is this part. It is becoming increasingly clear who, whether for political reasons, out of stupidity or due to treacherous intentions, serves Russian propaganda. Now, you could link that clearly back to Poland and Polish people, and which people in Poland are being much more susceptible. But I could certainly apply that to Donald Trump because he's very much susceptible. Head of the Bundestag's Defense Committee has called on NATO to shoot down drones over Ukraine, according to the Spiegel. He also stressed the need to strike drone production and launch sites in Russia, and urged allies to equip Ukraine accordingly. So this is what we want to hear. This is the CDU member of the Defense Committee saying, we've got to shoot down drones over NATO territories, and we need to be arming Ukraine to shoot and blow up those bloody Shahed drone manufacturing facilities straight away. Now, Poland is to send military representatives to Ukraine in order to get them trained on shooting down Russian missiles. They've even asked Ukraine what are the best ways to shoot these things down, and they're going to be replying, no doubt, something like, the Gepard as an older bit of kit, but something like the Skynex or the Sky Shield, which they have on order from Germany. And Poland, there is now a rumor that Poland, they're not too keen on buying stuff from Germany, the Polish, too much. That's why they've kind of gone more towards South Korea and the US. But they could end up buying some of these bits of kit, some of these SPAGs, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, from Rheinmetall. Polish Prime Minister, has announced at a press conference that Poland will cooperate closely with the Ukraine on counter-drone systems. We will draw on the best practices, and the Ukrainian ones are battle-proven. And then the Polish DM, I presume that's Deputy Minister, is it? Or Defense Minister, sorry, Kozyniak Kamysk, says allies made concrete declarations after Russian drones entered Polish airspace. The Netherlands will send 2 Patriot batteries, anti-drone systems, and 300 troops. So the Dutch are really, really doing a good job at the moment. Czechia, 3 Mi-17s with crews. France and UK, Rafale and Eurofighter jets. Of course, those Mi-17s might be in order to shoot down drones from helicopters. That might be a more cost-effective way of doing it. France and UK, Rafale and Eurofighter jets. Sweden, more planes and air defense. So, I mean, the problem is a lot of these ways are expensive ways of taking out the drones. What they need are more cost-effective ways to take out these relatively cheap drones. You send some of these AIM-9X missiles are sending from an F-16 or whatever are going to be $2.8 million, and that's taking out a $10,000 bit of kit. So, yeah. Now, Poland has completely closed its border with Belarus as we move on to other bits and pieces. Russia is currently conducting the West 2025 or the Zapad 2025 offensive military exercise in Belarus with Belarus for a future invasion, one might think, of Poland and the Baltics. So the Polish have closed down a border. That has upset the Belarusians. They've demanded it stays open. They've kept their border posts open, but of course, I presume you can't get through if the Polish are saying they're closed. Now, Russia say otherwise the whole cannot be closed. That they're saying that to the government preparing to increase VAT to 22%. VAT, value-added tax, a tax on anything you buy, pretty much, most things. Not usually in the UK, it's not on food and books and sort of necessities, if you like, but more sort of not luxury goods, but all sorts of other goods. That shows that they need money if they're going to put VAT up. Government is also considering the possibility of increasing the profit tax and the personal income tax. However, they've already been increased literally this year, the profit tax from 20% to 25%, and a progressive tax scale with a maximum rate of 22% was introduced for the PIT. So I think these are desperate times for the Russians. We hear that Japan and New Zealand have both joined the oil price cap on Russian oil. Japan is lowering the price threshold for crude oil imports from Russia from $60 to $47.6. Japanese Foreign Ministry also announced the imposition of sanctions on 52 Russian organizations and 10 individuals. New Zealand has also expanded anti-Russian sanctions and joined a price cap on Russian oil. Wellington has imposed restrictions on 11 individuals and 8 legal entities. In addition, the new sanctions affected 19 naval vessels of the Russian Shadow Fleet. Good stuff there. And then it's a busy day in Kiev today. So the Polish Foreign Minister, Radoslaw Sikorski's visit, that comes the days after the largest Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace during a mass strike on Ukraine in what Polish officials describe as a deliberately targeted strike and provocation. So he's there. We also hear that Prince Harry has accepted a request to return to Ukraine, saying, quote, "We have to keep the war at the forefront of people's minds." And he got off the train. I'm going to show you that in a second, because here it is actually, but not just him. So we've got the British new foreign secretary, that is Yvette Cooper. I think she'll be decent for the job. I think David Lammy did a really good job, to be perfectly frank, and he was strong in the UN. He's been strong in supporting Ukraine massively. He's now become deputy prime minister. No, he hasn't. He's become, I think he might have become deputy prime minister. Anyway, in her first overseas trip, no, not deputy leader of the Labour Party. That's still to be decided. Yes, he has become deputy prime minister, and I think he'll do a good job at that. I think he did a good job as foreign minister. So in her first trip overseas as minister, she will be giving $193 million to Ukraine for winter aid. And that was also coordinated with obviously Sikorsky and Prince Harry, or maybe not coordinated, but they're all there at the moment. The Polish foreign minister had a great soundbite on Fox News, and this is really, really important. So we're going to listen to this.
What do you think the fallout from that has been? What do you think the takeaway from Putin's perspective has been? He had that meeting in Alaska. He then met with the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, in China. And since then, the attacks seem to have been escalated exponentially.
You said it. We were supposed to have sanctions, and instead we got Alaska.
Lovely. We're supposed to have sanctions. Instead, we got Alaska.
And since then, as you say, attacks have intensified. So I hope President Trump does what he has said he might do. To help Ukraine win, you have to give them long-range missiles to continue a successful campaign against Russian refineries.
Worst case scenario, where do you think this goes?
Well, it would be if the arms pipeline dried up for Ukraine, and if the Russians managed to make a major breach. Remember, Ukraine enjoys US security guarantees in return for having given up on what was then the third largest nuclear arsenal back in the 1990s.
What do you think?
Well said, Sikorsky there. Now, I quite like Prince Harry, right? Of all the royals, he'll be the one I want to go down a pub and have a pint with, 100%. And I've listened to, the reason I like him is actually from an evidence-based point of view. Like I've listened to him speak at the Obama Foundation back in, I don't know, it's probably 8 years ago now. And I was listening to his interviews and speeches there, and he was absolutely on point. And he was talking about how to use power responsibly in the world. And I was like, you're a decent guy. You can just tell it. And the way people hug, for me, I'm quite a tactile person, right? So I'll hug people. But the way you hug, I think, or the way you just your demeanor is a window into who you are. And like, look at the way he meets this next person. There's a warmth there, and you could, like, nobody hugs like that if they're a complete and utter bastard. Is basically what I'm saying.
Super Royal Express.
Like a present from the Ukrainian. Let's go.
Have a great day.
So lots going on there in Kiev at the moment, and we've already listened to Radoslav Sikorsky there. So it's right, though. It's keeping Ukraine up at the forefront of people's minds. That's kind of my job, really, here. We've also had some movement possibly in the United States at last today, or yesterday, says Tim White. A proposal was put forward in the US to designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. So two Republican senators, Lindsey Graham and Katie Britt, of all people, teamed up with two Dems, Amy Klobuchar and Richard Blumenthal, to unveil legislation to be activated if Russia refuses to return the stolen kids. Now, I don't know how, it's going to depend on timeframes, isn't it? Because, it's just like Trump keeps talking about, we'll put sanctions on if they don't come to a peace agreement. and then he says 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks and it lasts forever. But you've at least got to put a time frame. The problem with Trump is 2 weeks means nothing. But for these guys, they've surely got to say they need to return them by this point. And if they don't do it by this point, otherwise it's like, well, you're just giving them an endless piece of rope. And you never get to the end of it. It's just like, if you refuse to return the stolen kids, okay, we will. Yeah, we will. We'll return them. Just, later. So I'll be interested in the details of that. So this, I'm going to leave you on what could be a really substantial claim here and a really good claim. So Politico is reporting that EU leaders have convinced Trump that Russia is not interested in ending the war and must be forced to sit down at the negotiating table. Yes, like we've been saying this for years. Like Trump should have known this on the 20th of January. He should have known that Putin wasn't interested in peace, therefore you need to force them to the table. Now, J.D. Vance was saying the opposite the other day. J.D. Vance said the other day that we don't want to isolate Russia. We want to just have a peace, and then we'll have loads of lovely economic deals with them. And I was saying that's the exact wrong thing to do. You need to force them to the table. The only way they sit down is if they're forced to sit down. Now, so if this is true, this is in direct opposition to J.D. Vance's position, and indeed probably many other MAGA Republicans. So Politico said a coalition of European leaders has convinced Trump that Russia has no interest in ending the war in Ukraine and must be forced to come to the negotiating table. Diplomatic visits have seen officials meet to discuss new financial restrictions and cut off Russian oil and gas supplies. Trump, quote, Trump is finally on our side. Now it's a question of how to reconcile the two approaches, said one EU diplomat. I mean, the idea that this is the admission, Trump is finally on our side, which means he's been pissing about for 7 months doing goodness knows what, but not doing what he's supposed to be doing. But he's finally on our side. As the bloc finalises a 19th package of sanctions, negotiations have privately said that the most effective measures will need to be taken in partnership with the Americans. This week, US President told EU officials that he wants to impose 100% tariffs on India and China for buying Russian energy, provided that Brussels follows suit, but that is economically and politically impossible for the EU. Trump has also called on Europe to stop buying fossil fuels from Russia. So if that is true, if Trump is finally on side, then this is amazing news. But, if he still comes out, the first opportunity he gets to let Russia off the hook, he says, well, it could have been a mistake. He does so. So, Politico might be reporting that, but I don't see the evidence of that from Trump. So that could be really good news, but it could also just be meaningless twaddle again. Okay, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for your support. Please, please, please go to atpgeo.com/donate. atpgeo.com/donate, and you'll get to the Autumn Harvest Car for Ukraine ATP Geopolitics page. We're almost at $4,000 out of 22 euros out of 22,000 to get 2 vehicles as part of this whole big campaign for the units on the front in Ukraine. Thank you to the people who have added to that in the last couple of days. So we are now at Stephen Burgess, Adrian Jacques, William Ingham, and Adrian Edward James, to add to all the wonderful people who already have done that I've named already throughout my videos. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please help out there. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.